even a great idea with a great market takes
you start
10 years.
out and you think, in 3 to 4 years we can sell it, right? And then 3 years after, you're still not out of the valley of death, right? You're still just building.
Even with the best investors in the world.
You're still building the MVP, right? So you think, because the entrepreneurial mind is also, you quickly map out all the opportunity and how the product should look like, right? Because that's an entrepreneur will do that. But from that point to when it's actually, built and completed, and you learn a lot along the way, it's 7, 8 years, maybe 10 years, right?
Well, welcome to the Red Chair. Today we have Henrik Zillmer, founder of AirHelp. Good to see you, Henrik.
Good to see you.
Welcome to Indico.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here. A lot of people use your app to get reimbursed by the airlines.
Yeah.
But first of all, Henrik, tell us who are you? How did you get to where you are today?
Yes, well, my name is Henrik. I'm from Denmark, Copenhagen, I started back in the day in the Danish Air Force or Danish Army.
Oh, really?
That was like a family tradition. And back then I think I got a little bit of a leadership taste, or at least wanted to start something and have people help me do it. And then I always had an interest in tech and in business and studied around the world and knew one day I would find myself in a entrepreneurial venture. So for me, it was always a matter of time before I would start myself. But I chose to get a lot of experience before and worked for Rocket Internet along the way. So those guys you might know, started a bunch of ventures for them in Asia, which was a good school actually for entrepreneurship. I didn't get so much in the university. I learned so much about entrepreneurship, but actually in Rocket Internet, you got a big sack of money and you got to do things fast and make a lot of mistakes. So that I think taught me some things as well in entrepreneurship. And then after that, I started AirHelp.
Which year was this?
This was in 2013. So
why did you come up with this idea?
So I'm from a family of pilots and lawyers as well. So. And what AirHelp is a company that helps you get money back from airlines if your flight's been delayed or cancelled. So it's kind of a legal service, but it's also travel service. And you can also say today it's a little bit similar to insurance because we do a lot of claim handling. And I've worked a little bit in insurance in the past as well. So I was flying a ton when I was working for Rocket.
For sure.
And I was experiencing delays, cancellations, my colleagues were as well. And I started looking into if I could get compensation for any of this. Because, for a lot of people, either it's missed meetings, missed vacation days, you have expenses as a result of these things, right? Or cancellations or flight delays. So I looked into it and I found that there's actually consumer rights that states that you're entitled to compensation. But hardly anyone knows this. And even the airlines.
It's the law, right? Also, right?
It's the law. It's
maybe not at the time.
In Europe, it's a directive. All the EU member states and the airlines there have to follow it. Now, today, there's many different air passenger rights around the world, but this is a law, and the airlines actually have to pay out. But even the airlines don't know the law either. I found out.
Or maybe they don't want to know.
Or they don't want to know, right? It's not a priority for sure. So. Once I looked into it, I found, there's a lot of people who are delayed, millions every year. Airlines don't do anything about it. And if you try yourself to get some compensation, they make it very difficult, or they don't answer, or they reject it like wrongfully, right? They actually say no when you are entitled. So that was kind of the frustration, seeing a problem and wanting to solve it.
So that you understood that there was a role for a kind of a broker or an intermediary to sort of represent all these passengers that had problems with airlines and also the easiness of the access.
I think the easiness is the most important observation, right? Because representing someone in the eyes of a court or a law is not new. Like legal work, lawyers have been doing this for many, many years, right? So also with these type of claims, but typically it will be, big groups of travelers. So the amount of compensation would be much bigger, worth the time of a lawyer to actually look at it.
Yes.
So that part has been there for years. But what I looked at was say, okay, can I create a new model where I take the technology angle and try to automate as much as possible in the whole process, so I can get much lower in the claim value, right? So it still makes sense for someone like me to help you do it, make it very easy for you, so you don't have to do any work, and then at the same time make sure that there's money for everything to run around, and that you can scale the company, which we decided to do as well. So that was the part with technology, adding it to legal, making a great user experience for the customer, and then starting marketing and scaling it.
You started in 2013. You had the idea. And how did you actually start? You went out of your
Yeah, so that's a fun story, because I was after Rocket sitting in Bali and living there for 6 months, and that was where I found my co-founder, so a guy called Greg from South Africa, and he was my CTO to begin with. So it was me and him, and we were living there and having a blast and working from the beach. And AirHelp, it was not called AirHelp back then, but AirHelp was one of many ideas that we were looking at.
Right.
And we were basically in a research stage, figuring out which one should we be, dedicating our time to. Because I always believe if you do 10 things, then at the same time you're going to do it half good, and then
you have to choose one.
And if you don't focus, then someone else will focus, and then they're going to beat you at it because you're not spending all your time on one project. So we had to choose one, and I think AirHelp became something that we saw that there was a demand for. And in the beginning, it was actually not a for-profit company. It was an organization. So airhelp.org was the first website we created, and that was simply a web form. You could type in your flight information, and then we would apply the law and tell you if you're entitled to compensation and what you're entitled to.
And was that an automatic process?
That was an automatic process. So we just converted the law into code and made a web form where we had a rule engine, and then if you answered, then we would give you an instant answer.
Today they would call it AI.
Today we call AI, yeah, exactly. And
it's not AI.
So then we've been working with AI for 10 years, but
exactly.
Many people use AI, and it's not necessarily AI. But
no,
what we did was
just a rule-based.
Just a rule-based engine,
which is what most AI companies claim is just a rule-based.
Yeah, exactly. So or a little bit of machine learning, right? Where we then teach it what to do in certain cases.
Exactly.
So that was the beginning, and we didn't charge anything for that. Did
you do it just to test if there were people?
Just to see if because I wanted to know, and it was like a cool little gadget, and to see if people actually would use it. And then it quickly got picked up by journalists in Scandinavia and Europe. So actually we were sitting in Bali and Thailand working from the beach, but we were getting all this traction in Europe of people using it. But then we quickly realized that all these people, didn't want to do the claim handling themselves, right? So
and that was the business model.
And that was there. So okay, can we then help them do this, right? But if we're going to help them, we're going to have to charge a fee, right? Because else, how's it gonna function, right? So then we said, okay, we're going to skip the organization model and instead do a for-profit company, and then charge a fee. So if we get the compensation for the customer, then we keep a percentage, right? And back then it was 25%. So if we won the claim, then we get 25%, and 75% is transferred to the customer. So they had nothing to lose. As a developer, it's very simple. You type in your information, it takes 2 minutes. You don't pay anything for it. You wait, we do all the work, and then if we get the money, you get 75%. And a lot of people said, I'm never going to do that myself. So I might as well just let you guys do it. So I think a core thing for our business was that there was a big problem. So there was a demand. People don't like paperwork, and it was a very easy sell to the customers, right?
Pretty obvious.
And then it was also quickly a media darling in a way, because maybe summer,
because everybody has
airports crowded, delays, cancellations. It's a good story, and who are the journalists going to ask? How big the problem is, and what are people experiencing? of course, someone like us, because we were getting all the cases sent to us, right, and all the customers asking for help to get compensation.
Yeah.
So that was how it all got started back in 2013, 14.
But then the secret sauce would be to sort of how to process the claims in connection with the airlines, right? Because it could become a very manual process. But you managed to sort of make it more automatic and more
so in the beginning we got flooded by customers.
And then what do you do with this?
Also because actually in 2014 we applied to Y Combinator. We got into Y Combinator in 2014 winter batch. We were at the top of the batch, I would say, in terms of press coverage and just in general the presentation.
And traction, probably.
So after that, like our name kind of exploded. And funny enough, the more press you get in Silicon Valley, the more press you also get in Europe. So Europe is looking at Silicon Valley, right?
Yes.
And then all of a sudden we were a household name. In Europe as the biggest and probably also the most known, and we were able to raise a seed fund on the back of that.
How big was the seed fund, do you remember?
4.7 million from Kostler Ventures, Evan Williams, the Twitter founder, Naral Ravikant, the AngelList founder, also invested. Some of the partners in Y Combinator, also Paul Buchheit, the inventor of Gmail. So a lot of the really Silicon Valley heavy hitters looked at our model and thought it was super cool and said, that's a new take on a legal model where you're applying technology. So that they were very excited about it. And back then, we were developing all we could, but we had more demand than what we could handle in terms of like automating the process. So in the beginning, we actually had to hire a lot of people,
of course,
to process all these claims.
It was very manual, of course.
It was very manual, right? So that grew quite quickly, and it wasn't before the COVID year started that we actually had time to then sit down and say, okay, now we're gonna have technology catch up with demand.
Interesting.
And then
it's a good number of years, right? 6 or 7 years until actually
it was well, we were also developing in those doing the 6-7 years, but we were also growing very rapidly, right? So if you're doing 100% year on year and you have travel, and travel goes like this, right, because of seasonality, then then you have winter months you have over capacity, and then summer months you have under capacity, right? So there was a constant balance, but the only solution is automation in our business, right? Like it's claim handling, it's very much insurance-like, and it might seem super simple on the outside, but there's a lot of knowledge that goes into the whole system behind what you see in the web form.
Did you manage to integrate with airlines themselves, or
so today so the process was that you first have to become such a big of a problem that the airlines will actually prioritize spending resources on you, and that took 5 to 6 years. And once they know, okay,
did they try to sort of brush you off at the beginning?
Oh, like Jesus, like they've done everything they could, like from the most aggressive being Ryanair, who sued me personally many times. To maybe more friendly airlines, being the American Airlines, who's more consumer friendly in that sense, but also they don't have any rights domestically in the US, so for them it's not that much being paid out. But like there's so many different tactics that the airlines use to systematically try to reduce the burden or the liability, and also slow down the industry. Right, so if they reject a claim, for example, we have to take legal action.
Right.
Because if we don't take legal action, they're just going to reject, and everyone else is going to reject. Right. So we have to have that legal enforcement in extension of our claim handling. And here, like building a legal network around the world that can represent you locally in the city court.
It's costly and
it's costly. And it takes a lot of time, right? But because we had to do that part of our business, AirHelp today, I believe, is one of the biggest legal companies in the world, right? Because we take legal action like 200 to 300,000 times a year, right? And these are individual legal actions. It's not class actions. You can't do that everywhere in the world. So like if you need to do that, you really have to automate a great deal of the process. You need to have legal robots that can assess which jurisdiction is the best jurisdiction for this claim and what's the probability of us winning and what documentation do we need and in what sequence do we need. And all this has to be, combined with what actually happened, what type of delay, what type of weather, what's happened in the airport.
So you get that information automatically also nowadays, or does the customer has to supply?
Yeah, so a lot of
with their opinion, let's say.
Yeah, so we always have to have some form of report from the customer on what happened.
Right.
But most of the data we use today, we aggregate from many different sources. A lot of it we buy, also huge expense, but that is needed because we need to deliver every claim to the airline on a silver platter, because that's how you build a relationship with them, and that's why the airlines eventually say, okay, if we get it from AirHelp, we know that everything's been checked, it's organized, and that's where you then start building APIs, which we have with the airlines today.
Oh, okay.
And then it's just automatically paying.
Then it's much
easier. And much cheaper, right? And less communication, and we don't have to read emails and all that stuff, and we don't have to go to court. So
which
I
is
think
better for everybody, right?
It's better for everyone. Well, the airlines will still argue that, if only today about 15% of all the people who are eligible for compensation actually get the compensation. 15%, right? Airlines are happy with that.
Of course.
Right?
Better than 100%.
And if they opened up the floodgates, it would be a much heavier burden economically, but also they wouldn't be able to process it. Right. So their process per claim, the process cost maybe 40 to 50 euro. Right. Our cost per claim is 4 to 5 euro. Right. So it's a fraction of that where we can do this, and I think the end game of this whole industry is that eventually a lot more people will know. They will claim, or maybe use us. The airline will get these claims, and they will eventually say, okay, this is not going away. It's getting bigger and bigger. We need to outsource the claim handling to someone else.
Right.
And this is what you've seen with like luggage claims or with expenses, because that's other companies doing that today.
It's insurance.
Insurance as well. If you have a MasterCard, you have an insurance on that. You have a claim. It's not MasterCard doing that. It's a claim company.
No.
So the airlines, I think, will eventually outsource all that, and then we will stand there with open arms.
Please use us.
and say you can use us, right? Because I don't think anyone will be able to do that cheaper or more smooth in
You're the global leaders, obviously, and with more experience and more APIs and so on and so forth.
Exactly. So, but it's the airline industry is slow and it takes time. So we're still building up educating the market, building awareness, and then expanding geographically.
So classic entrepreneurship story. First you learned with someone else, in this case Rocket.
Yeah.
And then you came up with a great idea with a solution which was for a big market and 10 times better than anything else out there.
Yeah.
And then it takes a long time, right? It takes longer than what people think.
Right? It does.
It's even a great idea with a great market. Takes
you start out and you think, in 3 to 4 years we can sell it, right? And then 3 years after, you're still not out of the valley of death, right? You're still just building.
Even with the best investors in the world.
You're still building the MVP, right? So you think, because the entrepreneurial mind is also, you quickly map out all the opportunity and how the product should look like, right? Because that's an entrepreneur will do that. But from that point to when it's actually, built and completed, and you learn a lot along the way, it's 7, 8 years, maybe 10 years, right? Because it takes a long time.
And the truth is, only when you get to the market you start really understanding what the customers really want, and what are the little details which make all the difference, right? So it takes time.
End of the day, I always believe that your competitive edge or advantage will always be the knowledge you attain throughout the process, right?
The journey.
And you're making all these mistakes along the way. But if you're not giving up, and if you're smart about it, and you
if you have the right investors that back you, right,
and you have great investors along the way, then that will be your advantage compared to everyone else, right? Like,
what were kind of like big mistakes that you looking back, stuff that could have been done differently? The ones you can share, the big ones.
Huge mistakes. I always choose to focus on what did we do right, but we did a lot of things wrong as well. And I think we started out in Europe, and Europe is complex because you have 15 different languages. And we believed back then and said, okay, let's launch everything in I believe it was 8 languages to begin with. That slowed down everything in terms of deployment because we had to translate everything, and it, you know, it just became this pain point where in the end we should just have launched with English and then kept it that for years. And once we had the funding and the people, then we could have started expanding, right?
Maybe today would have been easier with solutions.
Then today you could like probably do it easier.
Others, but
back then, with huge Excel spreadsheets, translations. Every time we deployed something, launched something, we had to get translations. So that was just one where we slowed down everything, and that's not the time you should do it, because you have to. I always said to my management team, you have to nail it before you scale it. Right, so we have to first figure out, is this actually working? And if it is working, just in English, okay, then we start copying it to other languages and other countries with other, air passenger rights and all that. And we wanted to do the whole world from day one, right? And with limited funding, limited people, that's
difficult.
Then you can drown, or you can slow yourself down, which is not what you want to do in the beginning, right? Other mistakes. There was so many that I can't remember them all, or I've blocked them out of my memory, right? I think also the fact that we hired so many people because we wanted to do it manually, and we didn't want to leave any customer behind, right? I think in hindsight I would probably have been more likely to say no to certain customers. Right, and say, but this is just not worth
it's not worth
the chaos and the amount of people we need to hire, because
you should have chosen your customers better, like define better who could you serve and not serve.
And again, we wanted to do everything at once, right? But that meant that you get into these yo-yo movements in entrepreneurship, which is very classic. You scale, hire a lot of people. And then all of a sudden, things change, or you realize, the unit economics doesn't work anymore.
Right.
Then you have to reduce again, right?
Classic.
And then you get a new round, or something else changes. Then we can scale again.
Yeah.
So you're going like up, down, up, down.
I suppose in the pandemic you went. I mean, there were no planes.
Well,
right?
Pandemic we couldn't really couldn't do much about. But that was of course also very dramatic for the company, right? And we almost didn't survive that. So I think. I would probably, if when I do my next venture, keep it more steady, right? Mm. But Silicon Valley trains you to grow fast and as fast as possible, and at all costs. And Rocket Internet also did that, right?
Right.
But then you spend so much time hiring, and then you spend a lot of time firing, and then you spend a lot of time hiring, and that is resources, like immense amount of resources you spend on this. And it's also something that can kill your culture, right? That you have good people leaving because it's just up, down, right? So
you would keep it a little bit more stable.
I'd be much more cautious and see, we don't have to grow necessarily, 100% year on year, right? It's great if we do, but if the organization can't handle it, then we're going to slow it down. And if the investors disagree, then too bad, right? They're not going to call the shots, right? Because I know they don't know maybe that this is not good for the company, right? So that is probably one of the biggest learnings, that I would do that differently and not get carried away and just try to go into hyper growth as fast as possible, because you can easily get there, but in a more sane manner without. Killing everyone in the process and burning out, which is a big problem today as well.
Did you notice, I don't know if you have European investors, did you notice that thing being a little bit more Silicon Valley led, this sort of like hyper growth? Of course Rocket was like that, but it was a very special case. But in your European investors, were they a little bit less adamant about growth at all costs?
Yeah.
Or was it all the same?
No, it's not all the same. I think definitely the European investors were more cautious in terms of growth, not as pushy. But then there were other things where, for the European investors, where they didn't see the ambition and the vision, right?
It's a difficult balance, right?
Yeah. So then, when in European investors, I was typically talking to management consultants and maybe some investment bankers, whereas in US, I would be talking more to former entrepreneurs, so people who have built companies before, right? And the management consultants look at companies with different eyes than an entrepreneur does. And therefore, they often have certain ideas on, creating a profit and like faster and stuff like that. So that becomes more important maybe in Europe, whereas in US it's just like burn and just go fast, right?
Yes,
and then you raise another round, right?
Exactly.
And
so then we'll burn more.
So it's a balance, right? Because of course it's healthy to create a profit, but also if there's a momentum, you can grow fast, and you should do that, right? And then on the US side, if you go too fast, then you run out of money, and maybe that next round is not going to be possible.
Yeah, right. It might just burn.
And that's why a lot of them go over the cliff, right? Because it's never a guarantee you can raise the next round, even if you have great numbers.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, it depends on the economic cycle and so many things.
Exactly. So for you to bet your company on that you're going to be able to do that, I see it again and again and again. Founders who then all of a sudden couldn't raise that round, and then they have to cut half the company and go in survival mode, right?
Particularly in the last 2 to 3 years, it's been like that, right?
Yeah, exactly, and that's not healthy, right?
Yeah. And so how did you come to Portugal? Why did you come here?
Yeah, so that's a fun story too. So actually, Portugal became one of the biggest countries for AirHelp very early on. So for some reason, then you can say, because we translated the app, then we had it in Portuguese. And then TAP Portugal, one of our biggest clients, have always been. Then
delayed flights.
A lot of delayed flights and cancellations.
Customers that needed some money maybe.
and a lot of Portuguese customers who picked up on it. We were featured in the press. We were in the news here over summer. I think it was 15 or something. And that then sparked the interest. And there was not really any competitors here at that time, so we were kind of seen as the new guys, and then we became this household name. We had a Portuguese office, and started processing claims here, and I think at the top, Portugal was our third biggest country in Amazing. 2015 or something like that. So that led me to start coming here. We also put all our Brazilian operation in Portugal.
Right.
Now we have an office in Sao Paulo too, but that meant we were running Brazil out of Portugal too. Mm-hmm. And then later on I started another company, actually. When I was doing AirHelp, we were moving office every 6 months. You may know that here as well, like, if you grow fast, then every 6 months you have to move office. And every time we had to build meeting rooms.
Right.
And renovate meeting rooms and all that, and spend some money on that. But then 6 months we had to move again. So it was a hassle and it was a waste to do that. So I said, okay, can we build some phone booths, some meeting rooms that are portable, IKEA model. We can take them with us. We can take them with us, right? It's easy to assemble. And that became Room.com. So Room was a spin out of another problem I was trying to solve for AirHelp, that then all of a sudden got a lot of traction too, because funny enough, a lot of companies, a lot of startups had the same problem as us. Right. And then I found a team of co-founders who then took over. I couldn't run both at the same time. So those guys took it over and started doing it. But in the first year or 2 years, I was going to Portugal because here there was an acoustic company outside of Porto that we worked with to build those phone booths, because it has to be if you build soundproof, you have to build certain materials, there have to be sound traps, and you have to still have ventilation. And
so you started coming here, and you liked it? I
started coming here in 2015, 16. Loved Porto, but I had a lot of meetings in Lisbon too. Loved Lisbon a little bit more.
Better weather.
Better weather too, yeah. Also better connected, because I was living in New York at the time, starting AirHelp in the US.
Go straight.
So I could go straight from Lisbon. I could go to Berlin for the European headquarters. I could go to Copenhagen, where my family lives, right? So Lisbon was very well connected, and fell in love with the place.
And you decided to move.
And then I decided to move. In 2018, found an apartment. Took a couple of years before we had packed everything together, but then moved here in 2020. And been super happy about it. Really a great place. And now seeing also a lot of more people coming here. Like a lot of people from Berlin as well. The entrepreneurial network coming
Great
here.
entrepreneurs here.
So and also back then for Rocket, I was actually helping out building a big developer hub here in Portugal as well. So I saw like a lot of stuff was happening, and my next venture I'm gonna start here.
Wonderful. Yeah. We'll be here to see that.
Yeah.
Henrik, it was great to have you at the Red Chair.
Pleasure.
And good luck with the next venture. And
thank you.
Thank you for coming over to Indico.
Well, my pleasure.
See you another day.